All right, I think we're ready to get started here. I think enough people have trickled in, so we'll get things rolling. Yeah, just want to give everybody a big welcome to our webinar today. Today we're going to be dispensing solder paste on factory fabricated PCBs using our V1 PCB tool. So yeah, very excited to have you all here. Just a couple of things that are happening today. So we are recording the meeting, so if you feel like you missed anything or want to rewatch, we'll be sending out an email after uh, the session. I think there's a couple people saying they might not be able to see everything properly. I believe I'm sharing my screen, so just make sure you're pinning the shared screen rather than my camera view, and that should help with that. Yeah. But yeah, beyond that, yeah, we're going to be doing a live demonstration today. So yeah, I'll quickly go over the agenda for you all. Um, yeah, so for the agenda, we're going to jump in with a quick couple of announcements of what's going on at Voltera over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, then we'll transition into our live demonstration where we'll be dispensing that solder paste. And then want to make sure you all stick around to the end. At the end of the webinar, we'll be sharing a promo code to save you money on the purchase of a V1. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that. So jumping into the announcements. Yeah, so a few weeks back, we launched Voltera Printing Service. So Voltera Printing Service is a service that you can reach out to, and we'll help fast track your research and development process and keep all your intellectual property safe. The process is quite simple. You go to our website, submit your design. We'll then meet with you to scope out the details of your project, what you're looking to get done, and we'll give you a quote. If everything looks good there, we'll then print your design for you and ship it off to you. And yeah, the turnaround time is quite quick. So if that's something you're looking for, we can absolutely help you with that. Just head to voltera.io/printing-service, and we can help you out there. The next announcement, if any of you are attending Flex Conference at the start of July 11th, 9th to 11th, we're going to be attending as well. So that's in San Francisco. So if you're going to be there, you can come see us and ACI Materials at booth 1961. Yeah, we'll be happy to chat with you, and you can see what we've got going on. Be very exciting to see you there. We're also doing a presentation as part of the talks that are going on at Flex Conference. So Kat, one of our co-founders, will be presenting on multi-layer flexible displays using electroluminescent ink. So yeah, very cool application that you can see her talk about. That'll be July 9th at 1:30 PST if any of you are attending. So yeah, very exciting stuff there. But yeah, that's it for announcements. So I think for now, let's just jump right into the demonstration. So I'm just going to switch my screens over to our software, and we will get started. Awesome. So there we go. Perfect. So the V1 software, when you open it up, this is kind of the lay of the land. So I'll give you a quick overview of the software itself here. So in the center of the page, we have all of the workflow tiles. So these are all of the operations that you can perform on the V1. So we can print using conductive ink. We can also print solder paste, which is what we'll be doing today. There's a variety of heating functions that you can do with the V1. The V1 has a built-in heated bed that can heat up to 240 degrees Celsius. So you can do curing your conductive ink, you can reflow solder, and you can even load in custom heating profiles if there's other materials that you're working with. Just keep in mind, yeah, the limit is 240 degrees Celsius there. And we also do drilling operations for two-sided PCBs. So you can drill so that you can rivet vias or through-hole components to your boards. So yeah, just opening up the possibilities there. And yeah, so this is the kind of the main area of the software. We also have a little chat option in the bottom right corner where you can reach our support team. So that's there for you as well. And then in the top right corner, we've got a couple of kind of settings and quick access buttons that are there throughout any of the workflows that we go through today. Yeah, so without further ado, I will just jump into the workflow and we'll kind of explain what's happening step by step. The software was designed to kind of walk you through and guide a user through the process of getting their board done. So yeah, you don't have to kind of know exactly what you need to do throughout the process. The software will guide you. So let's jump into a solder workflow and go from there. So the first thing that I'm prompted to do is select the solder paste that I'll be using today. So I'm just going to switch over to this camera. So on our cartridges of solder paste, there's a couple of pieces of information on the label that are useful to know. So first, we've got the name. We know this is solder paste. Then every solder paste and every ink that we provide also has a lot number. So this name is just a unique name for that batch or that lot that you can attribute to this specific solder. We also have an expiry date, which I know is getting a little bit washed out, but it's in kind of the top right-hand corner there. And then we also have storage instructions. So we want to be storing this in the fridge when we're not using it. But for today, I'm specifically looking for the lot name to be able to add this in the software. Perfect. So I'm going to click Add Pastes. And I'm looking at just the regular solder pastes here. So the solder pastes we typically work with are a low temperature solder paste. So they're a tin bismuth formulation. So we don't have to worry about working with lead. We don't have to worry about having fume extraction here. This is totally safe to work on a desktop. But yeah, the name from my solder paste that I'm working with today was Geeky Grackle. So I will click that one here. And by clicking it, I'm adding it to my library. So now that I've got it in my library, every time I go back to the software, it'll be available there for me to quickly select. So I won't have to go in and add that paste every time. And then if I add more materials, they'll start building up here and I can select the one I'm using for that day. So I'll select my paste and then I'm brought into the actual workflow kind of section of the software. So we've got kind of three main sections going on here. In the center, you can see the kind of the outline shape of our heated bed on the V1. So this is kind of representing our work area. And we'll be loading files in here and seeing actions take place throughout the process. On the left-hand side, we have basically the user interface. So this is where all of our user actions are going to take place throughout the process. So we will see, right now we're being prompted to load a circuit, but as actions are required of us as a user, they'll happen on this side. And then in this kind of blank area on the right-hand side, we'll get some helpful, useful tips and tricks throughout the process here as well. So I'll highlight a few of those as we're working through the process. But for today, I'm going to load up a file. So I'm going to select a solder file here. And I've got my webinar solder paste Gerber file here. And so yeah, Gerber files is the type of file that the V1 software accepts. Gerber's kind of the main standard for PCB fabrication across the board. So that's why we're using that standard. And once I loaded that in there, you can see it reflected into our work area. And you might have noticed it originally kind of showed up as orange. So that's the software recognizing it as a Gerber file. And then once it turns green, that's actually the software having figured out the tool paths that it needs to draw each of these shapes. So if we zoom in, I'm just using the scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in. If you're on a trackpad, you can kind of slide two fingers, but we can see the actual tool paths we're taking to draw these rectangular shapes. So it takes a couple of movements to fill in the shape fully. But yeah, kind of neat to see that happen. And again, I can zoom out here to see the full shape. But yeah, I'm happy with how my file loaded in here. So I can click next and the software will prompt me what to do next. So our next step is a quality checklist here. And here's a good example of kind of the tips and tricks that pop up throughout the software here. So it's showing me what calibration switches I should be cleaning here before starting a print. And it's giving me an example of what inspecting our nozzle might look like. So yeah, I just need to quickly make sure that my calibration switches are clean. So I'm just grabbing a Q-tip and then going to my printer and making sure we've got no built up material from the last time we used it here. Yeah, after a quick clean, I think we're ready to go. I have let my ink warm up, so that's not an issue here for me. It is good to note that, yeah, solder paste can sometimes take a little bit longer to warm up, just because it's thermal conductivity. So yeah, good to take it out of the fridge well before you go to use it. 15 minutes is a good starting point there. And I'm going to be using a fresh nozzle, so this message here, making sure my nozzle is not damaged, I don't need to worry about. It's going to be a fresh new one. So I'll click next in the software here. Perfect. So now we're prompted to clamp our board. So on the V1, we have some mounting holes on the left and right-hand side of our heated bed area here. And this is where we can slot in our thumb screws. They just screw into any of these places. So this allows us to kind of mount a variety of sizes and shapes of boards to the V1's heated bed. And then with these thumb screws, we also have these clamps that hold our board in place. So kind of best practice is to kind of count down the holes to kind of keep things even, so that we're matching the right and left side. That just makes alignment a little bit easier. But yeah, I'm just basically sandwiching my PCB here in between the surface of the heated bed and my clamp. And then I'm just tightening down the thumb screws by hand. And I don't need to over tighten. We're not doing any crazy milling operations here or anything like that. We just want to make sure that our board isn't moving throughout our process today here. So we'll get our second clamp in place here on the bottom. Again, just kind of sandwiching the clamp between the heated bed and our board, and just tightening down the thumb screws on either side. And once I've got it in place, I can just kind of give the board a quick little wiggle just to make sure that it's not moving anywhere. And we're all set. So that's the board clamped in place. And we also kind of have another helpful tip and trick video here walking you through that process here as well. But we're good to move on to the next step. Great. So one of the two tools we'll be using today is the probe. So the probe, I've got it here. So the probe is a fairly simple tool. It mounts onto our carriage, and then we've got a probe tip here that we use to measure the surface of the board. Now, probing is a really important step because it helps us generate a height map across the surface of our PCB so that we can know where we need to dispense throughout our process today. You'll notice that we've got magnets on both sides of the probe here, and they mount up onto our two rails onto the carriage here. So this makes it for a very simple mounting process. I just lock it into the rails there, and those magnets cling on really nicely to our carriage. So that's the probe mounted, and I can click next. Perfect. So we're being prompted to align our circuit here. So for this process, we have clamped our board in place and we've loaded in our file. Now we need to kind of match up those two pieces of information in the software so that we know where we're going to be dispensing solder paste is exactly where we want to be doing it on the board. So in this process, we kind of use a two-point system. So we use a single point, a first point, to basically locate where our board is. And then we use a second point to adjust for any rotation in our alignment there. So we're going to just quickly start off by moving to the feature. By default, the software likes to select two features that are really far apart. This kind of gives us the best precision, but you're able to select any features that you like as well just by clicking on them in the software. But I'm going to go with the default, selecting those two features that are furthest apart. And then I'm just going to click Move to Feature. And when we do that, the first thing that the V1 is going to do is it's going to measure itself in 3 dimensions, so X, Y, and Z. So we noticed that the first thing that the printer did is it went and measured itself on the Z switch here. So that's finding its height. And now it's doing some actions inside our X and Y calibration here. So it's moving left and right and then forward and backwards in order to find the exact center of our probe tool. And yeah, this is just so we know exactly where the tip of the tool is in 3-dimensional space. And once that's done, it's going to move to where our circuit loaded in and where it thinks that feature is. And from here in the software, we have the ability either to click on these the keys in the section here, or use the arrow keys on our keyboard to move that probe around. So I'm going to switch over to this view so you can just kind of see it moving. So I'm basically just trying to get it into a general placement here for now. And the feature that I'm specifically looking for is just this one right here in the back. So I'm just trying to visually get it roughly in the place. And then you'll notice in the software, I have the option to lower it. So when I'm in this raised position, every time I move the arrow key, it moves about 2 millimeters. And then when I lower it, it'll move 0.5 millimeter at a time. So we get much more precision once it's lowered down. So we can see it lower down here. And so now I'm just going to make some much smaller movements just to try and get this tool perfectly aligned for us today. So I'm just getting my face nice and close to the machine so that I can get it where I want. And once I'm happy with that positioning, I can click measure. So this will lock in that position of our first point. And then I'm prompted to move to our next feature. So when clicking this, we'll notice the machine moves over to our secondary point on the right-hand side of the machine. So I'll click that now. The tool moves over, and I'll give you a kind of a closer zoomed area as well. At this point, we're just accounting for any rotation in our board. So when we clamp our board, if I had it kind of off axis a little bit, that's what we're accounting for now. If I was a robot and I could place this board perfectly level, we would know where everything is based off of the first point that we checked. But because I'm human and to human is to air, there might be a little bit of rotation. So that's what we're accounting for here. So I'm going to lower in the software because we're pretty close to that second point. So it's going to go down there. And then I can use the arrow keys again to fine tune the rotation of this. So I just had to bring it a little bit forward. I was probably just about 0.5 degree off perfect rotation. And once I'm happy with that, I can measure this second point as well. And then the tool will measure it and we will have our alignment complete. And yeah, with our alignment complete, we can move on to the next step, which is allowing us to confirm our alignment. So in this step, we can click any feature on our board and the probe will go down, will move to that feature and go down and make contact with it. So we can visually confirm that we're happy with the alignment. So I'll click this one kind of just here in the bottom left-hand corner, and then we'll see the machine move over to it and we can confirm that it's kind of hitting where we want in the pad. And we can go check some other points as well. So if I click a pad a little bit further over, we can see that it's making contact where we want. And so it's good to do this with some of the smaller features as well, because the smaller pads require a bit more precision. And we can basically keep clicking features until we're happy that we've done our alignment the way we like. And if we weren't happy with the alignment, we could always go back and redo the alignment. But I think for today, I'm pretty happy with this. It might be a little bit off, but yeah, I think we'll keep moving to the next step here for time. Perfect. So the next step is to actually probe the surface of our substrate, in this case, a PCB. So I'm just going to hit probe, and then we can kind of talk through it as it's going here. So you'll notice that there are a variety of circles here in the software that are highlighted. And so these are the probing points generated for generating our height map. Now you'll notice we're not probing every feature on the board, and that's due to just kind of time savings versus accuracy requirements. This board's a pretty basic board. Everything's kind of on an even plane. So I'm not too worried about needing extreme accuracy in my height map here. So I'm just using the default probe pitch, and that probe pitch setting is determining how far away probing points are. Now, if I've got a board that has a little bit more interest or a little bit more kind of varied height on the board itself, I might want to decrease that probe pitch so we have a denser height map. And between these probing points, we're basically interpolating the data to generate that height map. And you can see as a point is probed on our board, the circle then fills in here on the substrate as well in the software. And here's just kind of the probe doing its thing in action as well. So it's just moving from point to point, and when those points get measured, they fill in here in the software. Now at the end, if there are any errors, like say we misaligned very poorly and we fell into a hole or fell off the edge of the board, at the end of this process, we'll be prompted with any errors in red. And that'll let us know that we've got an issue that we might want to address. But I think we did our alignment pretty well here, so I'm not expecting to see any errors. Awesome, so that's the last probe point done. We've got all blue. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to see any errors. So at this point, we are happy to move to the next step, which is prompting us to remove the probe. So again, the probe is using magnets to attach, so it's fairly simple to detach from the rails as well. And we just have to pull it off, and that's all set. And we can move to the next step. Awesome. So our next step here is to prime our conductor. In this case, we're using solder paste, but getting our solder paste loaded into our dispenser and then going from there. So we've got kind of the helpful tips section here on the side walking us through. We've also got a step-by-step instructions here on our software on the left-hand side here as well. So I'm just going to switch over to a little bit of a close-up view so you guys can see this process in action as well. So I've got the dispenser here. Maybe I'll go this view for now. So the dispenser comes in two parts. The top section, the kind of the actuating part, just twists out. It's a 90-degree lock-in. And then we've got the sheath section of the dispenser that mounts to our rails. Again, the same magnet system, but the sheath is hollow and allows us to slot our cartridge of solder paste inside of it. So all I need to do is remove the caps from our solder paste. So the top one just clips off and then the bottom one unscrews. And then I can slide our solder paste inside the dispenser here. And you'll notice that I put it with the label facing backwards. That's just so I have a bit more information visually through this viewing window as the piston is pushed down and dispensing. But the label going forward is totally fine as well. At this point, I'm going to attach a nozzle to the tip, just so I'm not making a mess. So I'm using just our clear disposable nozzles that you can get from our store.voltera.io. These come in a 25 pack. And they just use the lure lock system. So they twist onto the tip of the cartridge. And we just need it finger tight. We don't need that horribly cranked down or anything. Finger tight's great. And at this point, we're ready to insert the actuator side of our dispenser inside the cartridge. Now, one important thing to note is that if you're pulling this out kind of after a print, you might have the actuator extended a little bit. And it's just important to make sure we back off the actuator all the way before inserting it in the cartridge, or we might immediately start dispensing material. So good practice to always back it off fully before inserting. And then we can just insert it inside the cartridge and twist it to lock it tight. And at this point, I'm ready to do the actual priming portion of the cartridge here, or as of the solder paste. So what I want to do is I want to move the gear on the backside of the motor until it starts making contact with the white piston there. So I'm just twisting, twisting, twisting until I feel a bit of pressure. So just about there. And then with these clear nozzles, it's great. So I just made contact. So now as I add pressure, you can start to see the material coming closer to the tip of the nozzle. And so what I'm doing is I'm just slowly adding pressure until the material starts flowing out the tip. So we can see that flow there. And then I back it off about a quarter or a half turn just to make sure that the flow is stopping happening. So what I'm doing here is basically getting the cartridge to the point where it's on the edge of flowing, so that it could be ready to be dispensed. And so I'm just setting the position of the actuator for that. Now, it's not incredibly important that I get this spot on. We'll be able to dial this in the software here as well. But yeah, that's getting the cartridge primed. So now back here in the software, I'll click the next step, and it's going to prompt me to mount the solder paste. So again, this is the same process as the probe. So I just mount the dispenser onto the rails, and I just want to make sure that the gear at the top is fully seated into the gear of the carriage as well. And that's it. Quite simple. Again, just lining up the magnets on the rails and locking it in place. So with that, we can hit next in the software here as well. Perfect. So if any of you users have done dispensing with ink onto PCBs, you might know that there's a step where we do calibration on the surface of our board. Now, because this is a prefab board, we can't really do that calibration because it's going to make a mess of our work area. So what we can do is we can select a group of pads and kind of calibrate live on those pads as we're working. So we can do that really quickly in the software by selecting any of the pads here that we want to work on. So I might select this group of 8 on the left. And you can see I just clicked and dragged to select those. You can individually select, you can hold down Shift to add to your selection. But yeah, for today, I think we'll just select the group of 8 pads on the left to get things started. And then I can click Start here in the software. And you'll notice above it, we've got a graphic that kind of represents our nozzle. So we'll be able to hit plus and minus to adjust the starting position of our piston inside the cartridge to get it closer to being on that edge of ready to flow or not. And we can do that on the fly as we're printing. So I'm just going to click Start. And you'll notice that the first thing our dispenser needs to do is it needs to measure itself on the X, Y, and Z positioner switches in order to find where its tooltip is. And once it does that, it can line up to that probing and height map that we did earlier on. So it's doing the exact same process. It measured its Z height first, then it went in and got its left and right, forward and backward to find the center position in X and Y. And then we'll move over to our a couple of pads and we'll begin dispensing. So in the software, at this point, I can kind of keep an eye on things and see, oh, do I need more flow? Do I need less flow? And I can click plus or minus to set that position of the actuator inside the cartridge to start with. So I'll just take a quick view of my couple of pads here. It looks like the first couple were a little bit on the light side, and then in the software you noticed I added 2. So I might just add 1 more here just to get a little bit more flow coming out. And I can just wipe those couple of pads clean with a Q-tip. And then we can go and do those same pads again. Now, if I was having too much flow here, I could also hit minus to change that position of our piston. But in this case, I think we're in pretty good shape here with that volume of material. So I think I might be good to move on to the rest of the pads here. So I might select another group and just test out what's going on here. But in terms of this kind of plus and minus, there's no magic number that you're aiming for here for getting the flow. Again, we're just setting the relative position of the actuator inside the cartridge. So it's all based on where you manually place that piston. So sometimes plus 10, 15 might be required to get in the right position. Sometimes it might be a larger number if you were a little bit off when you were priming the cartridge. So a number like 50 might not be out of the ordinary. But again, it's all going to be relative to how you manually adjusted that before getting started. So print to print, you might see a little bit of variance in this number. But this is basically just setting the starting point for our actuator inside the cartridge, and then our print settings take over from there. So I'm going to select this next group here and click Start, and we'll see how those print for us. So we're getting a little bit of stringing, maybe between our features. So I might just dial back the flow just a little bit. Yeah, it looks like our alignment's pretty good today. And yeah, we're getting a good amount of flow here without any stringing in between the pads anymore, which is nice. Another nice thing of solder paste is it's pretty forgiving. It likes to move to the conductive items on our board. So if we had a little bit of stringing on these larger features, it probably wouldn't be an issue. But perfect. So yeah, I'm happy with the results we're getting right now. So I'm going to select the rest of the board here, and I will click Start to print those as well. And then our printer will go and do it. And I'll just give you guys a view of it in action. Yeah, you never get tired of watching the printer work. It's yeah, always a little bit mesmerizing and always enjoyable to see it in action. But you can see for prototyping, this is a great way to lay down solder to confirm that your board's working the way you want before placing those big orders for hundreds or even thousands of boards. So we got a question in the chat that might be worth quickly just touching on. So temperature of the solder placed will influence flow rate. Yeah, again, this is why we recommend bringing it out of the fridge for a few minutes before starting to dispense with it. Solder paste likes to kind of keep a cold core down the center of it. That can make the flow kind of a little bit inconsistent at first. So bringing it out of the fridge before you start working with it is a great way to do that. And then as for a recommended temperature, just room temperature seems to work really well and keeps that consistency going well. That's kind of what this paste was formulated for, just kind of running at room temperature. So that's what we're at right now. The V1 can't control the temperature of the paste once it's in the cartridge, so it's just whatever the ambient temperature is in the room. And if we go back to the software view, you can see just kind of a little bit of a countdown of the time remaining on our print here as well. Yeah, things are looking great here. And if at any time I notice that there's maybe a dip in flow or an excess of paste being deposited, I can still adjust those plus and minus parameters on the ink on the fly here as well. All right, so we're just finishing the last couple of pads here, just in that top right-hand corner. Great. And it just finished that. So the dispenser is going to move into its home position there. And so now I'll just kind of give the board a quick visual inspection here. So we'll just take a quick look, make sure all the pads got hit that we were looking to populate today, and make sure that there's enough paste on them and that there's no major pooling or stringing between pads. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this looks for today. So at this point in the process, this is where you'd want to start populating the board with your components. So this is kind of a great way to go about this. One of our team members from the applications team, Devin, put this together for me today. So he just printed out our Gerber file and then kind of placed all the components. This is a great way to kind of have things ready to go ahead of time. So you can just transfer them from this double-sided tape right to your board and then do reflow. For the sake of time and very boring content of me manually placing each of these components by hand in front of you, we'll skip that for today. But I will jump into the software just to show you how quick and easy it would be to get that reflowed once those components are done. So if we're happy with all our results, we can move on from printing, and we're prompted to remove our dispenser, which I'll do just pulling it off the magnets again, nice and simple. And then the job is complete. So it's reminding us to refrigerate the paste as well. So that just helps prolong the life of the paste. So once we're finished, if we were to reflow our board, we would just jump into the heat workflow tile here. And as I mentioned before, we've got kind of three options. We've got the reflow, the bake, and the manual, and we've got kind of descriptions for what each of those are for. So in this case, if you had all your components placed down, you would then hit reflow, and again, select the solder paste that you had used for your print, because this will pull in the proper reflow profile for that paste here as well. And with that in place, you make sure your board's placed down, and you can just hit start, and the printer will take it through the reheat profile automatically. So it'll come up to temperature and follow the profile required for this specific solder paste, and the components will reflow. But for today, I'll just kind of show you what the end result of that would be. We did this here just in this morning. So here is the board kind of in its finished state. So this was solder paste was dispensed on the V1 again this morning. All the pads were, or all the components were placed by hand, and then reflow was done on the V1. And yeah, we got pretty good results. We had one little floater here on the kind of the bottom right component here. So this guy over here, he floated a little bit out of place. So we could just do some touch up with a hot air gun to get that back in place. But overall, we got very good results on this board. And this board is a board directly from our Nova machine. So this is kind of the underside of the carriage on Nova. So very cool that we can prototype and work with our own tools to help work on our other tools. So very neat process there. Awesome. Great. So that's kind of the end result there. So I'm just going to switch over in our software here to my other screen. And yeah, feel free to keep asking questions. We've got a great bunch of people in the chat that can kind of stick around for the next 5 minutes or so and keep answering those questions. So yeah, we've got most of our sales folks, Gio, Charlotte, Raj. I think we've got Tom in from our applications team in here, and Mal from our marketing team. So yeah, keep asking your questions. But as for the content for today, kind of we've reached the end. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching the process of solder paste being dispensed on the V1 and how it can be, yeah, a great workhorse for that in your prototyping projects. And as I mentioned earlier on, we do have the promo code for you all to save off of the purchase of a V1. So you can use the code V1, all in caps, 800 for $800 off the purchase of your V1. Yeah, and you can do that right through our store.voltera.io, or you can reach out to our sales team at sales@voltera.io if you're interested in learning a bit more about the V1 or some of our other products. But yeah, really thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder that we're at Flex Conference July 9th to 11th. So if you're going to be in the area and attending, we'd love to say hi to you and chat with you there. So yeah, we'll stick around in the chat for the next couple of minutes. So feel free to keep asking questions. Yeah, but yeah, I want to thank you all for attending, and that's all from me.